Good morning. Good morning. Happy Friday. So I'm just on a road trip heading back to the BC area, and you can see I'm in the car, and I don't know if you can see, but normally it's blue sky and there's huge mountains in the background. Anyways, not today. So if you've been watching these spiritual lessons, then I am here today to present another one and to talk about the concept of emotional resilience. This, for me, I think is one of the most, if we're going to grow ourselves in any way as women, it has got to be around this area. Had to have the spiritual fortitude and the emotional fortitude to handle whatever life throws at us. So the point of becoming more spiritual. So if you've been following me or working with me, then you know that I had this real deep calling as a whisper messages that this is something I needed to really pursue in my life, a deeper understanding of spirituality and my own spirituality, a greater connection to it. And the point of becoming more spiritual, I'm just going to make sure I've got a story. There we go. Isn't to take away your humanity. It's not to take away your humanity or your human experience, which means how you react to things or how you feel things. But the whole idea of deepening your sense of spirituality is so that you can be more effective and comfortable in the skin that you're in, and that you can be more effective and comfortable in the relationships that you're in and in the situations that you find yourself in. Human emotions are part of the human experience, but for whatever reason, in the last 10, 20, 30 years, the human emotion, feeling your feelings, has become less and less acceptable. And, it's funny with women, in the older days, women in hysteria, being in hysterics, too sensitive, women have gotten a bad rap when really our emotional intelligence is part of our greatest gift. And so as life got harder, as things have mounted in the feminine, we've been taught to numb and oppress those feelings. And the problem with that is it's normal to have feelings, but feelings unchecked, feelings that run rogue, feelings that are unprocessed, do not end up serving us in the highest way that they could. Now, we have to remember the basic facts around this, which are emotions are created by your thoughts. So we have to understand that experiencing an emotion that isn't peaceful, that doesn't feel good for you, I'm trying to make sure I've got the microphone here, then what A Course in Miracles would say is that you're simply misperceiving the situation, because A Course in Miracles says only love is real. So anytime you're feeling anything other than love, then you have now entered into an illusion, or you've gone off base, or your ego is the one that is running the show there. So inner peace is the goal of A Course in Miracles, but it's also how you know if you're on track. Right? It's how you know if you're on track in a given situation. So when you get triggered and you go to lovelessness as opposed to loving thoughts. Hey, good morning. Hi, Stacy. I just saw you on. Hey, Alex, good morning. So in any given situation, when you're experiencing emotions that do not make you have a sense of inner peace or being able to connect to love, so our triggering emotions is basically what I'm talking about here. Well, then it's a sense that it's a sign that you've become disconnected. Now, where we get pushback on this is sort of in the intellectual understanding. It's not that you need to shut down your emotions or stay in negative denial. I talked about that last week. It's about positive denial. Negative denial is when you pretend that you don't feel it. It's when you pretend it doesn't matter. It's when you pretend it's okay. Many of us have been living our lives in certain areas with a lot of pretense. We're fine. Everything's okay. I'm good. I'm great, right? We can hear it in our voices, and yet it's not true. Fine on the outside, but crumbling on the inside. So it's not that you don't feel it, but positive denial is when you feel it, you totally get what is happening and what you're feeling, but you deny its power over you. The way you deny its power over you is by feeling it, not numbing it. I'm angry and I feel this way, but I'm willing to not be. I'm willing to look at things differently. I'm willing to move through these emotions. I'm hurt, but I'm willing not to be. I'm willing to see the innocence in someone else. I'm willing to understand what, how, and why something's going on for someone. Sorry, I'm shaky this morning. I'm just trying to balance in my car, right? It's to know that when we're in those deep places of triggered emotions, that's when we'll engage in sabotaging behavior, right? That is when we are not thinking with our right mind. That's when we're going to say the hurtful thing. That's when we're going to have poor behavior. I've done this. That's when we're going to lash out, retaliate, and we're going to meet an attack with an attack, a lovelessness thought with an equally lovelessness thought, less loving thought. And for me, when I'm in those places, do you not know that you are likely to mess with yourself? Like, it's like you're more likely to mess things up in your life when you're in that place. And this is why A Course in Miracles and, this idea of getting grounded in this day and age for women is why it's so important to cultivate that time of stillness and silence and meditation and prayer, and really starting your day, each day being open to a miracle. I don't know about you, but I am like open and willing to receive a miracle. I don't want to push them away. I don't want to not believe in them because I want to receive them. I need those things in my life. I desire those things in my life. Now, this is why, the ego is reactive. When you meditate, you become responsive. You become responsive. How many of you have ever said something in a moment and you're like, oh, God, why did I say that? I shouldn't have said that, because you can't take the words back. Now, this is how, when you're experiencing an emotion of any kind of lovelessness, then what you need to say is, dear God, right? Dear love. If you can't say the word, dear love, I'm willing to experience this differently. I'm willing to see this differently. I'm willing to feel this differently. But because A Course in Miracles says love cannot deliver into you what you are unwilling to accept, because we are individuals with free will. So when you express the prayer and ask for help, that is how help will come. And it will come in a form that you may not expect, understand, or recognize, but that's the whole goal of life, is to start paying attention. That's the definition of patience, is to pay attention to the messages. We're getting messages all the time in songs and writings and people, the casual conversations, repeated messages. Are we awake? Are we tuned in? Now, what happens over time is we form these emotional reaction patterns where there's a trigger, we have an emotion, and then these emotional patterns can become our default positions. We've talked about this. Instead of being vulnerable, we put up walls. Instead of being curious, we get judgmental. Instead of being loving, we get mean, right? There's things that happen. And so when you go through healing, here's what A Course in Miracles tells you. When you go through wanting to heal things, and when you ask God love to heal your life, it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's what you need to know. Because all the stuff that's been putting down, it's like a magnifying glass gets put on your life. And the things you were previously immune to, numb to, not looking at, had blinders on, whatever you were anesthetized to shows up. And it can show up all at once. And that's okay, but it may not feel okay. So when you start to surrender to wanting to live a better life, a more peaceful life, cultivate more inner gratitude, more love, loving attitudes towards others, you might find you get really tested, like really tested. And that's okay. It's part of the process. Now, when I'm thinking here, you have to become willing to also not be who you are. If you know who you are when you get triggered is not nice or not loving. So when you say, dear God, I'm willing to not be this way, but it's become an emotional habit, then what will happen is life will put you into relationships with someone who do not have the same emotional reaction patterns as you, so that you can suddenly see how someone who's dealing with something you're dealing with is handling it completely differently. It's how we learn. And then you're going to see a new way to approach something. You're going to be like, wait a minute, this happened to them. Same thing that happened to me. I lost my shit. My head spun around and I got really angry or upset. And they calmly dealt with it. It is through that we know miracles happen. The way they handle the situation with love and not with emotional dysfunction. I want that. So sometimes we need to have people who are modeling the way for us, people that we're learning from, because the imprinting in our psyche was never one to be functional anyway. It was always dysfunctional, and we don't want it to become malfunctional. I talked about that last week too. So I'll say it every time. It is easier to act yourself into a new way of thinking way more easily than it is to think yourself into a new way of acting. I can promise you all, do not overthink things. But do try to get into action a lot more quickly. Do not stay stuck in indecision. Move into a decision and course correct if you need to. Can you hear all the sirens? When you practice this, you will have a different emotional skill set, but you have to try it out. You will never think yourself into a perfect way of being. It's only through being that you can get into a better way of thinking. Okay, it's flipping it, and it works. So A Course in Miracles says that you're not perfect, or you wouldn't have been born. Your aim is to become perfect while you are here. You're not perfect. Big surprise, I'm not perfect. I've got lots of, I know, I know. But I'm aiming to get better, right? I'm aiming to get better. So A Course in Miracles says the goal of living is to remove or prevent, to remove the barriers that prevent us from having love. The goal of living is to day by day knock down these bricks and break down these walls because they're the obstacle for us, and we deserve to receive love. You deserve to receive love. And that we have to sometimes realize that some of these biggest obstacles are within our own personality, because our own personality creates our own personal reality. And the things we think, the attitudes we hold, could I be in a more noisy place? My goodness, there's ambulances and fire engines all around me right now. So loud. So here are the phases of willingness. It never bears to have these repeated, and I would write them down. Phase 1, oh my God, it's awareness. I just did that. I see that I'm doing that. I can't get myself to change in the moment, but I want to change. I can see where I need to become willing to change. Okay, that's the first step. Second step, I see that I'm doing it. I saw someone else do it differently. I saw someone else handle it differently. So I'm going to try and do that. And you're going to stumble. Okay, you're going to mess it up. You're not going to do it. You're not going to nail it. And the third is, when it happens to you, you just do it a little bit differently. When we do that, we win. Practically speaking, whatever situation you have in your life, get to know, you have to know yourself. What are your typical reaction patterns, emotional homes? Watch somebody else in your life who's in a similar situation, who's handling it differently. How can you do it just a little bit differently? When it happens, is it the pause? Is it a breath? Is it a moment where you just is it a moment where you see the innocence in someone and then do it a little bit differently? And then rinse and repeat. So our wisdom will come from the tenacity that we pursue our life and getting better at living our life from a more loving perspective. That will be the greatest gift we can A, give ourselves, and B, give to everyone else in relationship to us. The other thing I'm holding deeply in my heart right now is what I don't heal in me, the generational or wounding that has occurred in my mom's life, my grandma's life, and so on, whatever I don't stop, I pass on to the next generation. It means I'll be passing that on to my kids. So it's up to me, and it doesn't matter if your children are born, the shift can happen in you and be felt by them. That is how we heal intergenerational wounding. And that is how we cultivate a higher level of emotional resilience in us, which then transcends into our children. So, as always, love to hear your thoughts on these lessons, things I'm learning, things I'm trying in my life. Thank you for watching, and have a good Friday. I'm sorry it was so noisy here in Golden today.